Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz.
And today we are checking out the penultimate episode of Series 15 of Doctor Who, Wish World. In all of our pre-season coverage and leading up to this is always the episode where I've been like, I have no idea what this is going to be. Wish World is such a confusing title. The pre-release, like 5 seconds of teaser footage that we got when they were announcing all the names didn't really show us anything except a clock. And I don't think anyone was really expecting this. It's a weird one because it feels like for 35 minutes of the runtime they're just trying to make you go, what is going on here? Like, it's so intriguing. Like, it draws you in, being like, what is going on?
I'll say this, I was kind of not anticipating this because, yeah, it is very strange. And somehow, when the facade gets ripped away, it becomes even stranger.
It does,
just with all the weird details. But I wasn't as surprised that the first half was like this.
Well, I think more
not
so
as
I
much
just
as I
kept
could have
waiting.
been.
More so, I guess I just kept waiting for some kind of answer. And the fact that they make you wait so long for it is mainly what got me the most.
Yeah, that's true. They really let you sort of sink into the weird world that these characters are now inhabiting.
Yeah, I tell you, like, if last season was RTD saying to himself, I'm gonna put the Rey Skywalker, your family is nothing reveal in Doctor Who, then this season feels like RTD saying, hey, I'm gonna put WandaVision in Doctor Who. Just there's so much of WandaVision in this episode where they're living in this fake world, everyone's going along with it, there's someone pulling all the strings, like...
And a weird sort of...
when I was watching it.
And a weird... It looks like it's been set in the 50s. Like, even when they find the iPad, it's like, oh, what the hell is this thing?
Which makes a lot of sense, given the thematic nature of why the world is how it is.
Yeah, no, which world? And honestly, it reminded me... I mean, that particular WandaVision reference is a bit lost on me. I've only seen, half of the first episode. But for me, it reminded me a lot of some of David Lynch's work, simply because in Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, and Twin Peaks and Fire Walk With Me, there's a weird duality where there's the surface world, which is very kind of cozy or seemingly cozy and sort of lighthearted, and the dialogue's really weird and the acting's kind of over the top, more so than in this, but still. And then underneath there's a lot of darkness and sort of conspiracy and things like that. So that's kind of what it reminded me of a little bit.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, like, it just right from the start, it just throws you into this really bizarre world of seven suns, and then you wake up and the Doctor and Belinda are married, and
oh yeah, Seventh Son of the Seventh Son. I love that Iron Maiden song.
Yeah. I guess it's... I don't know how I feel, because honestly, there is a part of me that is like, are they pushing too hard on the intrigue here? There's obviously we're gonna see how it all resolves next time, but there was a part of me that was like, now that we've seen how this world operates, and we've seen it from heaps of different angles, I was just kind of waiting for the Doctor to figure it out and snap to it and be like, okay, well, this is weird, I'm going to try and stop it. Because I was waiting for the Doctor and the Rani to meet. That's what I was waiting for. I was waiting for their interaction for the first time since 1987. And when you get it, we're still kind of waiting for it. Because it wasn't the Doctor and the Rani meeting, it was John Smith and the Rani meeting.
Yeah. I mean, it does happen, but not until the very end, and
Yeah, by
everything
that
just
point,
kind of goes to hell so quickly that it's not. They don't soak up that moment. This is not like when the Doctor, when David Tennant and the Master met for the first time,
Yeah.
right? Where you had
when they had their phone call, yeah.
yeah, it's something that was like that moment was understated, but like there was so much in that understatement. Whereas here, like it's understated in its own way because it's not, melodramatic or it's not seething with tension, but there's not a lot like underneath it. It's not, these two. It's not like this ominous meeting of these two titans like we would see with the Master. Now, whether that's due to RTD wanting to do something a bit different because he realizes, oh, this isn't the Master, so we've got to go maybe with a different angle.
Yeah,
or whether there's just so much going on here that maybe he didn't have time to put it in. I don't know. It doesn't bother me terribly because it's.
Well, that's not really my. That's not really my main issue.
Yeah.
Because like I said, we're probably gonna get that next time. Here's my main thought. You get like 20 minutes of like establishing the new world and just letting us live there, and we're getting like some flashes through of stuff that's happening, and the mugs are breaking, and that's clearly something. And you're there going, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. I wonder how they're gonna. I wonder what's the explanation for this. How they're gonna go, and then you're just sort of still in the world for the next 20 minutes, and you don't really get too many answers, or at least not answers to the big questions. And then the last 6-7 minutes or so is the Rani just telling the Doctor and the audience all of the answers. So the pacing for me felt a bit off in that regard.
Yeah,
I was waiting for the Doctor to work something out on his own, and then like drag Belinda along to the Bone Fortress in the sky to confront the Rani, but it didn't happen because I think like something like that. If you get the reveals more gradually throughout the episode, I feel like that helps the pacing a bit more. It feels like the first 20 minutes you're like, oh, okay, this is interesting. I'm wondering what's going on in this world, and then in the next 20 minutes you're still doing that, and then you get 7 minutes of answers all at once. And you're kind of like, wait, hang on, what? This is wait. So this means that, and that means this, and let me process what I'm getting. Slow down.
Yeah. Look, it's a fair point,
and it's a that the point of that is necessary, right? Because the whole point is to overwhelm John Smith to get his doubts to flush to the surface as the Doctor. That's the whole point of it, and I understand that from a story perspective, but it's just a shame that the pacing had to suffer in that regard.
Yeah. Because even and maybe it is helpful. Like I'll make a comparison back to 10th Doctor meeting the Master for the first time.
Yeah,
the pacing of those episodes I think were better. That might be because Utopia is essentially like a prequel to the finale. So they're able to certainly layer the mystery of who the Master is a bit better. Here, like as you say, there's a reason for it, right? And maybe even in a more meta way, one of the reasons for doing it is, again, RTD wants to do something a little bit differently. And it's kind of interesting to have the Doctor be so out of his element that, he doesn't solve the mystery like he normally does. He's forced to be told what the mystery is, and that sort of demonstrates how powerful the Rani is at this moment, which is a whole other layer of, I think, thematic complexity, which I find quite interesting and quite disturbing. But that doesn't change the fact that purely in terms of pacing, it's strange, right? And it's not even so much that the Rani gives that much exposition, because I think at this point in the narrative, you do need quite a bit of it, because we've been teasing to this mystery throughout the whole season, and the beginning of this episode is throwing a lot at you. You need some kind of explanation to ground it, but to have it all crushed into what's essentially like 7 minutes of exposition. Like you get a little bit of preamble when you go to the ship and you've got Mrs. Flood and Conrad in the room and Desiderium as a baby, typical Doctor Who stuff. I'm sure you'll agree. But it's just... I see what you mean when it feels off. And I like that first 40 minutes. I like
Me too.
the tension and the tone. I really thought the tone was very interesting, and even though there's weird bits of sort of almost needless exposition in that part of the story, that's the point, because it's it's very stylized. It's not, this clearly isn't the real world. It's way too fucking sunny for an average day in the UK, for a start. But even beyond that, it's really bright and cheerful until it isn't. And that sort of thing, like, you and I, I'm sure, have seen that stuff in plenty of media, right?
Sure.
Even beyond the ones we mentioned earlier in this recording. But that in itself is still really, really interesting, and having it connected to doubt, and having Conrad sprinkling the Doctor's backstory in a way that people don't, like, they notice it, they listen to it, but they don't... Actually, no, I'll put it another way. People in that world, for the most part, hear what Conrad's saying, but they don't listen to it, if that makes sense.
And if they do, it's to generate more doubt.
Yeah. And mystery for the audience, of course.
Yes,
so, that's all really interesting. Incidentally, this is a small thing. It was very, very funny watching the 15th Doctor pretend to be straight.
That's so funny.
which I mean, not only do I mean that he obviously, like, this world clearly punishes and despises queerness, but just even the small nuances, like when he's I'm Mr. Average Joe when I'm going off to work now. Bye, darling. Take care of the kid. This is normal stuff. It's like, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's that episode of SpongeBob where he turns normal and he's like, he's got a rounded head and he's like, "Hi, how are you?" It's something like that, and it's just.
But it's also so, like, completely emblematic of, like, I'm watching this and imagining it as, like, the Brady Bunch kind of thing, like it's deliberately doing that kind of, like, over the top happy family acting, and I love that the subtext is there of, like, covering up something else.
Yeah, and it's and a lot of it, like we say, like 1950s and old school sort of family shows, and it is a lot like stuff like Leave It to Beaver and the Dick Van Dyke Show. But even that's meant to be kind of disturbing. Granted, I think they could have gone further, just with those themes of homophobia and certainly misogyny, because there's that weird bit where Belinda's talking to her mum and grandmother, and her grandmother's like, "Oh yeah, she'll grow up, she'll be a good woman and a good wife and a good mother," just because everything that Conrad says is right, So
I think I'm glad that they don't overplay their hand with that thematic stuff. Actually, I'm glad that they keep it at the level of subtlety that it is at the moment.
I suppose.
I feel like it's better in a story like this, where it's like the world is bending to one man's wishes. I feel like it's a lot better if the audience is allowed to piece together what's wrong with this society instead of being told what it is.
Well,
obviously
that's true,
the episode is telling us what it is, but at least this way, again, I bring it back to I forget what episode I brought this up. No, it was Robot Revolution, where I was like, if at least one kid sees I forget the misogynist's behavior and says to themselves, it was Alan? Okay. If one kid sees Alan's behavior and goes, "I don't want to be like that," then it's done its job. Likewise, if a kid is able to figure out for themselves why this society sucks, fantastic.
Oh, and I don't even think, like, the question of subtlety, I don't even think that's the issue for me, because the way, like, for what it is quite good, and I'm kind of glad it's there simply to, I guess, enhance the thematic richness of the story. My main point is, I would want it sort of integrated in a more like in a bigger fashion in a way into the story. But I realize, 45-minute episode, then they don't have a lot of time to do that.
Yeah, and it's also like, it's the point of this episode. I doubt it's going to continue into part 2 now that the world is imploding in on itself.
Yeah, I guess it's tough. Like, it's one of those things where when you, when writing a story, I guess, you decide, what to cut, what to include. And on one hand, I'm tempted to say, purely because of how little time seems to be devoted to those specific, individual ideas, you wonder, well, does it need to be in the narrative anyway? But on the other hand, I'm glad on principle that they are, because even if this is an example of, as I've said many, many times, with Doctor Who, it being, the sum being greater than the whole, I'm glad for the pieces of that sum, because it is very, one, just very engaging, and two, it's useful commentary. It makes the whole thing really kind of wonderfully uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's such a great moment when Belinda calls the police on the Doctor, and you realize, oh shit, they're not calling people, or they are, because they're just questioning the world in general and the fact that it's so bizarre. But they're also because of this whole bigoted side of things. That's also why people are being. This is a fascist world. This is straight up a.
Yeah. Like it's like a horrifying, and this is kind of, I guess, why I mentioned.
It's WandaVision meets 1984. That's what.
I think it's why I sort of mentioned David Lynch's movies as well, because it's a stylized portrait of like the 1950s, particularly in America, because that's sort of the vibe we're getting, I think. But it's also it is like a dystopian lens of what that world was like, which has probably a greater element of truth, certainly a greater element of truth than a lot of the bullshit nostalgia you see for 50s stuff, like you saw in movies in the 80s, for example. But
this feels like such a harsh critique of quote unquote the good old days.
Oh yeah, which I'm sure I've spoken to you, Cuff, either on this podcast or just generally.
You have, yes.
I love that kind of thematic expression, because I think it really. I honestly don't think people, well, maybe not people, but that idea, I honestly don't think it's mocked enough in society, even in the world that we live in. So yeah, like, however, like, yeah, I kind of think however bad the past used to be, I can almost guarantee you it's worse, or at least it was worse for some people than others. Anyway, so that's really great that this episode is doing this. And when you've got the bit where you have, I mean, it's kind of heavy-handed, but it still works, when you've got literally people saying, oh, hey, police, sorry, my friend's doubting the narrative. Can you come maybe drag them off to prison, maybe rough them up a bit so you can get this scum out of my life? It reminds me of, the paranoia of, against communism in McCarthyist America, that you'd have, cops literally tapping your phone, searching your trash, getting people to inform on you, getting people to look out for, oh yes, those terrible, nasty communist elements and tendencies. I literally, actually, this is funny, bit of a sidetrack, but I literally saw the other day on Instagram just a clip of one of those 1950s PSAs that they make, and one of them was like, so here are some signs that your friend may be a communist. Does he express communist views? Does he frequently read communist propaganda? Anyway, so things like that. And it's, I think, I personally would have preferred it if all those themes were kind of maybe even wedded back into the Wish World thing a bit more cohesively, but one, it makes sense, just on principle, right? Because it's Wish World, and it's a very wishful thinking that they're, using with this world, because that's exactly what people think the 1950s was like. And it's also just on principle, I find it compelling to see it.
Well, I can
Also, it's a 45 minutes
identify...
episode. How are they gonna?
Well, yeah. But I can also identify, I think, the exact moments in the story, or at least the threads in the story, that I would like to have woven in a bit cleaner in order to, like, cement these themes as part of the narrative. And that's the Ruby Sunday B story with the with the disenfranchised and the disillusioned from society. It's like, I wish that they'd actually gotten to do something.
Yeah,
by the end of the story.
I agree. Now, granted, part one.
It is part one. However, London is decaying, the Earth is imploding, and Shirley, in this reality, not a unit officer. So, I don't know what they can do at this point. Yeah. I was in a bit of I was questioning in the moment when they were like, "We're going to break into that." It's like, cool. What's the plan? Oh, they didn't tell us. Okay, what's the plan? How? How are you gonna topple society?
To be fair, they can think. Thinking is the first step, and I don't mean that in one of those pretentious sort of super philosophical ways. I simply mean it's useful to have like genuine critical thinking skills within those systems. So they've already taken the first step. But as you say, especially if we're going to just look at this episode, as it is, that is a really strange subplot to leave hanging, and even the whole like ableism angle, that's a cool idea. That's great, but it just, they don't really do much with it. Like, it's part of the narrative, obviously, because they're outcasts of society. People don't pay attention to them, including Conrad. So that's what gets in there. But like, it doesn't really lead to anything. They just sort of,
well, not yet. But for now, no.
They're essentially there, like, in the end, with that sort of last scene when London's collapsing and whatnot, to sort of just give information to the audience, and it's not very satisfying. Now, granted, it could turn around. It could be that these characters play a much bigger role, and I honestly think they probably will. I mean, you don't just bring back Ruby Sunday for no reason.
Well, I think that's part of it, right? Like, their purpose in the story is to wake Ruby up properly and get her out of this, I'm a bit confused, sorry, never mind, and get her into properly, okay, no, this is fucked, let's do something about it. Like, that's what that is. And I would be very surprised if Ruby isn't in some way involved in the next part.
Yeah, might be surprised.
As a result.
But yeah, as it is, that subplot, I think, particularly, more than maybe anything else in the story, I just felt kind of frustrated with how they didn't really tie it together. It's just kind of there. Especially, again, with those themes of ableism. Great themes. Very weighty, worthy things to consider. They're just not woven into the narrative as cohesively as I want to. Again, we've got a really complex, fairly complex story with a pretty wacky season, even by Doctor Who standards, and we've got to tie all these things together in a 45-minute episode. So it's not that surprising there are narrative elements that don't, that aren't as decisive in where they want to go. But it's just a little bit unsatisfying.
That's how you can. Just a quick tangent. That's how you can spot them. The people online who want to hate this era for a pretty obvious reason but want to hide it, they always use the same buzzwords. One I see a bunch on Facebook is when this era is described as bland. And I'm like, well, you're definitely not watching the same episodes that I am, because there has been nothing bland about, I don't think, anything this season so far. Like it or not, like, it's okay to not like it because it's like doing something a bit off the wall if that's not to your preference, but like, it's objectively not bland.
Yeah, it's been pretty experimental and strange, again, as I said, even by sort of Doctor Who standards. I mean, I don't think you can look at it, even if you thought that the meta element in Lux wasn't as successful as it could have been, I really don't think you can call that bland. That was new territory. But a kind of similar thing here, where I don't think this subplot is bland, and I think on principle it's got interesting ideas, but because it's not being woven into the narrative, it doesn't. It lacks that strength, you know. It lacks that punch that you kind of know it should have, right?
Yeah, and I really hope they turn it around in the next part.
Yeah, I do, and maybe it is a bit rich to be complaining about this, because the fact is, again, the sum being greater than the whole thing, that's a problem that's plagued Doctor Who for decades, right? Even some of my favourite stories have narrative elements that didn't go where they probably could or should have. I mean, you and I have reviewed episodes that do that, for for better or worse. But it's just especially because this is the finale, right? You kind of want all of those narrative trajectories to be really aiming to where they're meant to go. And I don't think, as much as I want to say this is an example of RTD, you know, trying to do something different, trying to experiment, which I do think it is to a considerable extent. As far as I'm concerned, I'm just detecting a little bit of I don't know, like a lack of technique with some of the narrative stuff here. And I don't, you know, I realize we're two, you know, morons with a fucking podcast just talking shit. So Lord knows anyone listening don't take
50% of us are qualified to critique a script.
Yeah, it's been a very great honor working with you, Cuff.
Come on.
Anyway, I'm joking. And look, hey, yeah, you've got.
I don't have a degree. Is that what I'm referring to?
Yeah, but you've had more like on the ground experience than I have. I mean, by the time you were. No, generally.
You're book smarts, I'm street smarts. I've always said that about us. That's always been our dynamic.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. Well, I mean, like, by the time... This is, sorry for the audience, this is we're just going down memory lane here. This is a bit of a peek behind the curtain. But by the time Cuff was 21, on his 21st birthday, he won an award for a short play festival in Sydney, and Jesus Christ, what the fuck was I doing when I was 21? Oh, that's right. I was my first year of my second year of switching to the creative writing degree, and my stories really sucked. That's what I was doing. Anyway, that's a whole backstory which we don't have time for at the moment. But yes,
so the point is. Actually, at that point in time, I had never had a sip of alcohol in my life. And I had said to my cast, if we win this thing, I will drink alcohol. Well, my point is, like, it's not really street smart to be sober, if depending on who you ask. So perhaps you were the street smart one back then, given that you were also in your infancy is like learning like these creative techniques, whatever. So at some point, did we pass each other like ships in the night in terms of what kind of intelligence we possess?
I don't know. Maybe by the time I'd decided to do honors, I guess.
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah. What year was that again?
I did it over 2 years. It was 2019 and 2020.
So you okay, 2019. I can't think of any like key like life altering things from 2019.
You did do your big play the year before. I know that much.
The year before, yeah, but that's still I would still qualify that as book smart. Street smart is more like on the street smart. That was the year that I was briefly a door-to-door charity salesperson. I was getting for the charities, so literally on the street. So there you go. That's when we passed. 2019 was the year that we so briefly waved goodbye to each other from the different lanes of the wharf as we departed. This is an extended analogy.
He grew up on the streets. I grew up in the books, and together we decided to make a podcast where we talk
And
shit
the
about
point of,
Doctor Who.
yeah, I was gonna say, and the point of that long diversion was for us to say that we know what we're talking about when we say "do better, RTD."
My microphone just fell down.
Great.
Yeah,
The Rani.
yeah. Let's move on to that.
Let's move on to the Rani.
Yeah.
Great. It's always like it's this. I obviously I haven't seen any of the Rani in the classic era. But it's great that she's diversifying from Time Lord science to Wish science. She's exploiting the science of the Pantheon to get what she wants. She's really upping her game here. And and again, I haven't seen any of the Rani stuff, but like this whole thing where it's like she's kind of using Earth as sort of like guinea pigs in this big experiment that revolves around the Doctor. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, does that kind of fall in line with Rani's motivations in the past? Has she ever been this pro Gallifrey?
I don't know specifically pro Gallifrey, but the scientific inquisitiveness, I think that's part of it. And in fact, I'm pretty sure in Time and the Rani, she was trying to like work out some sort of experiments, and that involved, I don't know if you know, but that involved her also deceiving the Doctor in a considerable way, because she took advantage of his post-generation madness by disguising herself as Mel for some reason.
Okay.
And getting Mel kidnapped by a pig-faced henchman thing. God, that story's strange. But yeah, I think her backstory is that she is a scientist, and I actually liked that line where she said to the Doctor, most of your enemies try to destroy life, but I try to, like save life or something like that. And I thought, that's an interesting idea. And what can we do with that? Because so many of the Doctor's enemies do kind of just want to destroy, whether they be the Daleks or even the Master. So
at times, yeah.
And incidentally, I think I said before, like, I was slightly nervous that, this is another villainous Time Lord character. Is she going to be too similar to the Master? I think there are surface level similarities, because she is kind of playing up the supervillain quality with, the outfit and her demeanor and the way she talks to her underlings and things like that. But I think there are still important distinctions. She's
incredibly,
she's like, one, she's kind of classier than the Master is.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean like the fact that he does go full blown sociopath at times. She's obviously more cool and collected, but just the way she operates, she's not so much. I don't think she's into like head games for the sake of it. She's obviously into head games because of what she's doing to the entire world, but there's more of a purpose there. Whereas, like, the Master has done like whole stories just to fuck with the Doctor, just for the sake of it. But I feel like the Rani's got something bigger planned, not just trying to harness a really powerful thing to, destroy worlds and have fun. There's something, going on there. So I think that's going to be interesting to see it play out.
Yeah, totally.
As she is, though, I quite like her. She's again interesting. She's stylish. The opening was actually pretty chilling.
It's terrifying. Yeah,
I'll give it credit. That was, and it's weird because there's almost something silly or comedic about it. It's got a fairy tale quality. It's like, oh, hello, Surf family. I don't like you. Oh, I'll use my magical powers to turn you into violets and ducks and an owl. Yeah, but it's also really uncomfortable.
So, like, it's also incredibly a science experiment as well. She's tinkering with the powers of this new god.
Yeah,
it's just completely chilling, and the fact that she just does it like so
without a second thought.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great start as for like a reintroduction of this character. And you know what else really struck me is, I know I complained about the pacing of the last 7 minutes and how how it batters you over the head with answer after answer until you can't think anymore. But like, good lord, I mean, Archie Panjabi just fucking owns it. Like, she relishes in those moments.
Yeah, a really good performance. And again, just as a comparison, she does relish in those moments, and she is playing a supervillain type of character, but it's not too over the top. Even compared to someone like Roger Delgado, right, who was very much a kind of this sort of Bond villain type. Archie Panjabi is doing something a little bit different there, and she's certainly not like some of the more manic energy of someone like John Sim, for example, or Sacha Dhawan even. So
I think John Sim's a good comparison because, like, when he's doing his big, like, oh, look at me, look at how great my plan is moment at the end of Sound of Drums, I think he'll do a bit of it, and then he'll just take a moment to just like laugh at like how brilliant he is. But the Rani is a lot more like, oh yes, this and that, and oh my goodness, aren't I clever? And this and that as well. Yes, amazing.
Yeah, it's a bit more pragmatic. Like, she obviously does kind of sort of indulge in her own ego a little bit, but it's not the same thing as when the Master does it. Like, like I say, it feels like she's on an actual mission, not just let's fuck with the Doctor or anything and everything he cares about sort of a thing. And I think that's important because it makes her still frightening and intimidating, but it makes her distinct. And again, it's why I love that line so much, where she says, I sort of sustain life or bring life. I forgot what the line is, but it's that line. That there's almost a weird, almost twisted morality to it, which is a whole new dimension. So I'm glad that they brought this character back, actually, because that could have been way worse, right? To put it mildly, like it could have been, okay, he's a returning villain. Yeah, they're a cardboard cutout for the Master, but whatever. It's a returning villain. It's exciting. Don't question it, actually, just accept it.
Actually, now that we know the Rani's intentions, it couldn't have been the Master.
Yeah.
Like, the Master would never want to do this. Ever.
No.
So it makes perfect sense to use a different Time Lord in that role.
Yeah. Maybe you could argue the Master would want to use like a wish world thing to fuck with the Doctor's head, but not doing what the Rani's doing here. Again, the bigger plan. But yes,
actually, like great comparison. Actually, the End of Time. Again, John Sim's Master. He does bring Rassilon, the Time Lord, High Council, Gallifrey through to Earth, but he does it so that he can use the same thing he's done on humanity and become every Time Lord. It's an ulterior motive behind it. Here, it just seems like the Rani wants to restore Gallifrey and Omega however she can. There's no, like, sense of, like, oh, and once Omega's back, I will finally rule. Yeah, exactly. There's no, like, there's no extra double cross, or at least it seems like there isn't, which I think is the key difference.
Yeah, I agree. And it makes it purely, oddly enough, because it's not so twisty, I guess, that actually makes it more interesting. Like, the fact that her motives are well, they're not pure, but they're slightly more straightforward, right? I think.
Yeah.
And that there is this weird moralistic element. I'm honestly really interested to see how that gets expanded. But it was interesting, this whole thing of like a wish world, right? Wishing literally an entire world into existence. Now, I really wish I wasn't a dum-dum once again and completely avoided social media until I watched this story.
No.
Because it was spoiled for me.
It was your turn to do this.
This is the second fucking time I've done it. I was spoiled with the Rani, and now I'm spoiled with Omega. So, found out about that. That annoyed me. But even if I want to say this, even if I didn't know who Omega was, by the end, when they start talking about willing a whole world into existence, I think like a lot of fans, I'd be scanning my brain and thinking, okay, what feeling could we be dealing with this time? We can't be dealing with the Master, because that's old hat. We've seen it before. Yeah. We've already got the Rani. Let's think, who's got enough power to will a whole universe into existence by their will? Oh boy.
It's Omega.
That guy. It's Omega. who
And it's
literally
interesting that
created
they
a whole
describe.
universe in antimatter. So,
Well, it's interesting that
ooh,
they describe Omega as being trapped in the under universe.
yeah, the Underverse, yeah.
The under, well, it's called the under universe. If they called it the Underverse in this, it's because in the Giggle, the 14th Doctor referred to the Toymaker's domain as a hollow beneath the under universe.
Oh, is that what he said?
That's what he
That's
says, yeah. So that's when they
right.
named it as such. So after Omega cosplayed as Peter Davison for a little bit, this is where he ended up, I guess.
Yep.
Here's a key question. Do you think we're actually going to see Omega in the next episode? We heard his voice in archive footage. But do we actually get to meet Omega in the next episode? Because my thoughts are kind of like, I feel like if they were going to show him, they would have put him at the end of this as a big, like, Omega is back, feel my, like, look at how powerful I am moment. But they didn't.
Yeah, like the ending of the second last episode of last season with the big Sutek reveal.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they would have done a Sutek with it.
It's a good question.
And another part of me really hopes that they don't use him in this, because that would be a Sutek. I want the Rani to have the full focus for this story. And maybe Omega gets out, but we don't see him, and then that can be a setup for future if Russell is intent on using Omega in something else at a certain point. I am just terrified of all this build up with Mrs. Flood, all this like this great like Rani stuff that we've got going on, all the effort we've put into setting up the Rani's world, for Omega to come in like 20 minutes into the next episode and completely overshadow all of it.
Yep. It's a good point. It would be. I think I've talked about this before with Doctor Who. Initially that crops up with some stories. You would have too many talking heads because you've got the Rani, you've got Mrs. Flood as kind of her comedic underling character, and then you'd have Omega and
Conrad.
Maybe that might and also Desiderium, the god of wishes. I mean, granted, he's an infant, but
yes, I don't know if Desiderium is going to be. Maybe Desiderium plays a factor in like the Doctor wishing the world back to normal, but I don't really see Desiderium as being like aha, and now I'm taking over.
To be fair, stranger things have happened before, and space babies.
Well, yeah. It was great to have the baby make that laugh. And I love that the last couple of years of Doctor Who have like coded into my brain that whenever I hear that sequence of notes, I'm just like, oh
yeah, and not in an annoying way, right? Because
not at all. Yeah,
that could be very overused, right? You hear
totally.
this theme in obnoxious ways, but no, when it comes, it feels just right, and it's really chilling whenever it does. But your point about Omega showing up and there being too many talking heads, I do think that is a potential issue, and I'm kind of torn because on one hand, I do want to see Omega because that'd be just really exciting, right? But it could really disrupt the characterizations because there's only so many, villainous characters and titans of Doctor Who lore that really one episode is going to be able to handle. Yeah. And actually, one of the things I wanted to bring up, do we have too many recurring villains this season? Because think about it. We've got Lux and the Pantheon, right? I mean, not Lux specifically, but the Pantheon. That's fine. The Pantheon's fine.
I wouldn't describe the Pantheon as a returning villain. I would describe that as...
Well, I mean, returning, like, villainous concept, I guess, is more what I'm getting at. Sure. Or I'm expanding my definition to include them. Okay. And the Pantheon makes sense because they're the big sort of villains of this new era. Sure, that's fine. But then you had the Midnight Entity. That definitely seems to be fair, more of a next season thing because I can almost guarantee you that's not going to get wrapped up next episode. No. Then you've got the Rani. Then, if you want to get technical, sort of Mrs. Flood, even though they're kind of the same character, but still like a similar thing that's showing up again and, presenting a threat. And now we've got Omega. Now...
Well, okay, I'll go through those...
Sure, yeah.
Sequentially. The Pantheon, as far as I'm concerned, they can just crop up every now and then, and it's not going to really draw too much focus. Like, especially in this instance, the Pantheon is being used as a vessel for another villain to do their thing, and they're not the villain themselves. So I don't think that's,
I suppose,
crowding the plate too much. I
maybe,
wouldn't be surprised.
That's why they're an infant, right? So
yeah, sure. Exactly. I also wouldn't be surprised if we never see the Midnight Entity again. I don't think that the ending of The Well was to set up something for the future. I think it was just meant to be a, whoops, we're leaving the Midnight Entity as this super powerful thing that can never be beaten because to make it so scary. Then with the Rani and Mrs. Flood, I don't think at this point you can have one without the other. They are both the Rani. So
yeah.
I really only see that as one villain. So in terms of this season, no, I don't think there have been too many returning villains, but it will largely depend how they use Omega next time.
Yeah.
Is going to be my call on this.
And I think, well, that's kind of the thing, like, individually, they're all really great, and they all make sense. And even collectively, some of them together are fine, but, like, I think, as you say, the tipping point will be Omega, because if he shows up and sort of steals the show, that it could definitely sour the episode, and even theoretically sour the season, because there's just too much there. And especially given like, Archie Punjabi's Rani is really interesting and compelling. I want to see more of her. How much time, are we going to have here? Even if the next episode is extended to, say, 50 minutes, or, well, I don't know, 50 minutes is average, but like an hour, for example.
Yeah.
How much is RTE going to cram in there? I think, it's just going to depend. Because one of the things I thought to myself was, apart from, like, small things, well, not small, but like episodes like the Pandorica and Trenzalore and things like that, is this the most, amount of recurring villains that we've seen in a season in Doctor Who? You perhaps can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's one of the... It's not, pardon?
It's comfortably it isn't.
Okay, right, fair enough. I was thinking of season 21 with Peter Davison's Doctor, where you had the Sea Devils and the Silurians, you had the Daleks, you had the Master, you had, I think, showing up twice, you had this android creature called Chameleon showing up twice, at least I think it was twice in that season. But anyway, regardless, I think purely the way they're using these villains, with Omega, it could potentially be the last, the straw that breaks the camel's back, and it may not come together as well as it could. That being said, and I know I sort of set this whole section up as saying, oh, this is not a great thing, but like, so far, the way the villains have been used, I'm not too bothered with. I think for me, it's just seeing as many recurring villains, it just strikes me as slightly strange. That's all. I think that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, that being said, there's still a lot of old villains I would love to see 15th Doctor fight. He's got to face the Daleks at least once. He's got to face them at least once. I'll bring this up now before we go any further with this. And I can't believe this rumor is still persisting, but do you think Shooty Goblet is regenerating next week?
Oh.
I don't think it is. I don't think he is going to. And I'll give you my reasons why. Again, I can't believe I have to justify this.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Like, in the history of Revival Who, it has never been kept a secret that a Doctor was leaving.
Yeah, that's true.
We've always known, like, at least, like, 5 months in advance.
Yeah. And, like, because if you're casting the Doctor, it's got to be, pretty big. It's got to be a really big
news, yeah.
casting, and why would the BBC or Disney, for that matter, hide that?
Exactly.
How does that make sense?
We don't know if Disney is going to keep Doctor Who as like one of its assets, but it's still going to continue with the BBC regardless. There's also, we know there's going to be a gap next year, no new episodes while they create the next ones. That's fine. The show's had breaks constantly throughout its time since returning 20 years ago. They're nothing special. They don't necessarily facilitate a Doctor departing. It's never for a regeneration specifically. That being said, there has never been a year, there's never been a full year of a gap immediately after a regeneration. The next season has always come out and it's been, okay, new Doctor, let's introduce them real quick. So I don't think it makes sense for, I don't understand why. I just don't think it's going to happen. I'm putting a lot of eggs in this basket here, but I just don't lend any credence to these rumors. I just think, again, it's some wishful thinking on behalf of some people who don't want him to be there. I don't think it's going to happen.
This is just pardon me, this is a bit pedantic. When you say there hasn't been like a year-long break after Regeneration, would Jodie Whittaker's generation actually count there? Because wasn't the centenary special in October, and then the 60th started in November?
I mean, yes, but also even in that situation, we knew about Ncuti Gatwa.
Oh yeah,
6 months prior to that, even.
Yeah, true. Look,
special case because that was a regeneration specifically for an anniversary year. So they were kind of stuck in terms of when the centenary special and the 60th anniversary special, the gap between that was immovable.
Yeah.
For what they wanted to do.
Look, let's just for a second deal in the world of fantasy and possibility.
Yeah.
There may be like a tiny, well, I don't think it's actually going to happen either, but like the tiniest chance that they'll have this break and then they'll start casting for the Doctor, theoretically.
It's possible.
But I don't...
But, like...
It's not likely.
And from what Russell has said, next season's scripts are already written. And they're writing the ones after that as well. They're not going to do that without casting.
Yeah.
They're not going to write a whole season of scripts without knowing who the main character is going to be.
I mean, I think the closest that the show may have come to when doing something like that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you say that for Matt Smith's first season, a number of those scripts were sort of written with David Tennant in mind? They didn't quite know.
I don't know about that. Potentially some, like, guest writers. I mean, Neil Gaiman definitely wrote The Doctor's Wife with David Tennant in mind, but, like, this is a showrunner we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be unusual.
Yes.
Yeah, look, it's possible that they could do something crazy and unprecedented and say, "Oh, here's this new casting we've been keeping under wraps. It's
the only way that makes sense
is it's Richard E. Grant, or it's
yeah, I was going to say the only way that makes sense is if it's a big name.
Yeah.
And then if it is a big name, good fucking luck keeping that under wraps.
Yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't even... Yeah, how would that work? So, yeah, I think it's unlikely. And there's nothing... I mean, I don't know, maybe there are some seasons where a regeneration is more anticipated than others, but there doesn't seem to be anything to indicate that this is going to be a regeneration for Ncuti Gatwa, especially given that if you look at even some moments in the episode The Well, or especially in the Interstellar Song Contest, you really get the impression that this Doctor has more growing to do, right?
Yeah.
And
completely.
Even though some of that growing could happen off screen, it could just be, okay, this Doctor's got the psychological tools to keep learning on his own. There's got to be, like, we need to see more growth with him, right? Like, there's no way that the Doctor would have a, let's be honest, a borderline homicidal fit of torturous rage happening an episode of this season, only for him to regenerate 3 episodes later. Or 2 episodes later. That just...
Waters of Mars is close.
Yeah, but even then...
Like...
And the finale, especially of that season, like the end of time, flawed though it is, it really tries to do the leg work with a big send-off, as you know, I mean, that second part, I mean, you know, what are we really talking about there? Plus, I think there's been some other character growth there, especially with, I mean, I know it's a season beforehand, but with the Rachnos children and Donna challenging David Tennant's doctor about that, there was more groundwork being laid, is my point. And I don't think there's been enough of that laid with Ncuti Gatwa's character yet. So I would be... Yeah, honestly, in retrospect, I'd be astonished if Ncuti Gatwa regenerated next week. That'd be...
The only way it happens is if there's some massive behind-the-scenes drama we don't know about. If it's another Chris Eccleston situation where Ncuti Gatwa is like, I'm not doing anymore, and they hastily tack on a regeneration to the end of this story that doesn't really lead into a regeneration. This isn't an he will knock 4 times moment. This isn't a Trenzalore. This isn't a subtly teasing a regeneration for Peter Capaldi's entire final season. Like, we're not... The groundwork hasn't been laid for a regeneration.
It hasn't. And even if, like, in terms of behind-the-scenes stuff, because I think one of the rumors that's been thrown about a bit is that Ncuti Gatwa is trying to have a more of a big career in like, especially Hollywood acting and wanting it to take off. Even if that's the case, I don't think he, RTD, or the BBC would be, I guess, that, I suppose, disrespectful to the lineage of the show to just write him off that quickly. There would have to be at least another season to, you know, to give it the rule of 3 sort of a thing.
And also, Ncuti would know that, like, leaving quickly from a show that has this kind of a fan base to start a Hollywood career is not a good look.
No. Especially, like, I know a number of people who've played the Doctor, they did use that, or the show kind of was used as a stepping stone in retrospect to a bigger career. Certainly Peter Capaldi is a great example.
And Karen Gillan.
But that sort of thing happens more naturally. It's not like... It
does.
It's not like Capaldi went to Moffat and said, oh yeah, by the way, it would be really great if I could star in one of those comic book movies, so you can just write me off at the end of next season, because fuck it. I want a fun career making the big dollary dues. The overall point is, I think it's highly unlikely that Ncuti Gatwa is going to regenerate next week. I'd be staggered if he was.
Just the way that, like Hollywood can't stop an Avengers script from leaking online. You think the BBC can stop casting news from leaking?
No, I mean, people were going nuts during filming for the 60th because someone leaked some photo of Matt Smith who happened to have his hair in a particular style that was sort of similar to the 11th Doctor. I mean, there's no way, just living in the internet age that we are, there's no way that this idea wouldn't be leaked.
I mean, I saw apparently like there was some rumor circulating and it got a bit of traction that the 16th Doctor would be played by Billy Piper.
Oh, I think I saw a meme about that.
Yeah. No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean,
as of at time of recording, we have exactly 4 days to eat these words. But Billy Piper will not be playing the 16th Doctor.
I mean, here's another way of putting it. you and I, for our season predictions, came up with some pretty batshit
Yeah,
predictions, and none of them involved Shooty Gatwa regenerating at the end of this season.
no.
Even as a joke, we didn't
Even as a
do
joke,
that.
yeah, we didn't even consider it.
Yeah.
Next
So
season we'll talk because that would be
yeah,
Shooty's
that
third
would make
season. Which
sense.
apparently 3 seasons is the unspoken agreement that all Doctor Who actors after David Tennant have agreed upon, that they would only do 3 seasons and then leave.
Yeah.
But
So
let's get
we'll
off of
see.
this and actually talk about Wishworld again.
Yeah.
Seeing Rogue was a surprise.
Yeah, that was cool.
It was great. It was cool to see him, especially like the way he was integrated into like him being the thing that breaks the Doctor out, which ties back into the bigotry of this world. It was a really neat internal justification there.
Yeah, and so and the thing is, like, having a cameo like that can be very sort of frustrating or distracting or just done for the sake of it. But here, it's integrated pretty well.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's left in this sort of terrible hell world that's about to slip into the void, it makes sense because that is. I mean, I know this sounds kind of obvious, but that is where we left him off. So,
and we left him there with the explicit setup of Doctor's got to find him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it makes sense that he pops up again. It also makes sense that he pops up again this like many episodes later, because it's just right around the time you're starting to forget about him, and then he crops up, and he's like, oh, you're like, oh yeah, that guy, he's still out there. I'm glad they're keeping that door open for some like arc later on where the Doctor finds a way to pull him out. I almost even think that could be the story that causes a regeneration. That would be big enough, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if, let's say, the Doctor travels into this hell world and then maybe into the void, that could be pretty intense.
That's a big thing. Exactly, yeah. Did you know the behind-the-scenes stuff about this, by the way?
No.
Okay, so Jonathan Groff filmed this in front of a green screen, like, around the same time that the episode that he was in was filming, and no one knew about it, except for him and RTD. And there's a video online of the table read of Wishworld, where when they get to that point in the script, they project the footage onto a big screen that everyone's looking at, and like you can see Verita Sethu, Millie Gibson, Shooty Gatwa, they're all like, whoa! In that moment, it's really great.
Funny.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Conrad for a bit?
Okay.
He's back. He's kind of interesting. He's got a kind of again, sort of a supervillain charm. He's still an asshole, which is kind of compelling in its own disturbing way.
But I also like. We didn't have many good things to say about the way Conrad was handled in in Lucky Day. Yeah. I'm really fascinated by his portrayal in this. It's just that one scene where he's like, there's like flooding in South Africa or something. I'm not focusing enough. I need to like keep the weather good or something like that. And like he's clearly wishing the planet to have good weather. But it's just so fascinating that they've given him this thing of like, oh, I genuinely want to help the world and be like, but he's an awful person. And it's like, this really like interesting dichotomy that is so obvious given the kind of person that they're obviously lampooning with him. But like to see it like into this scale, it's like, it gave me like a little extra layer of the character that I think was missing in Lucky Day.
Yeah, because in a way, like that story, they almost seem to be confused, right? Because you wonder how sincere he was, because in the end he reveals, oh yeah, I am a liar, I've been lying about all this, but here they almost seem to be reversing the position thematically.
I don't know if it's reversing it, because like I think it's more like, yes, he knows that he's lying about Unit, but again, he's he's doing it because he thinks it's the right thing to do. And
for the greater good sort of a thing.
For the greater good, exactly. Yeah.
I think either way, it is interesting to see it taken in to sort of this direction, and yet at the same time, like he is presented it. Well, yeah, they literally say he's the god of Earth, right? But he's also a puppet, really.
Yes.
He's almost like no, he's the face of this horrible leadership, but the Rani is actually the de facto leader here, which is
completely, yeah.
He's essentially just this sort of glorified TV presenter and live-in nanny, which is which is interesting. But there's some psychological depth that's going on there because he feels he's got a purpose. Maybe there's even something symbolic about the fact that he's looking after Desiderium as like a next generation sort of thing, thinking about the future. He's clearly having his desire for purpose and desire to impact the world on a greater scale sort of warped and manipulated by the Rani. I think there's even a line where, not the Rani, but I think Mrs. Flood sort of comments on that. I can't remember exactly what she says, but something about him wanting to find meaning and be part of a bigger picture. So that's interesting. And yet, on like that surface level of him being a villain, it still feels very convincing, which is useful for the first, 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, like, how I want his story arc to end.
Yeah, I don't know.
In a way,
it's
want to see more of him, but I just think how they're going to do it.
Well, I wonder what his reaction is going to be to the Earth imploding. That he mustn't know about that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there'll be some grand reveal where it's like, oh my god, what have I done? I wanted to help people, but the world's sinking into the underverse. Oh, help. I'm going to betray you, Rani. Sorry, Doctor, for lying. Please don't let me die alone in misery, That could be a way to end it, but,
I don't know, I kind of don't want this character to get,
like a redemption arc.
Turnaround. I don't want this character to get a redemption arc. I don't want this character to be the hero at the end. I don't know, it's weird.
Would you be comfortable with him doing, I guess he'd kind of maybe be redeemed here, but him doing almost like a sacrifice play, would that work any better, or would you find that just as frustrating because he's become a martyr?
I almost wonder if the Rani's ulterior motive with Conrad is for Conrad to become a new vessel for Omega to possess, to get out of the Underverse. I can see that happening, be interesting. Actually.
That could work.
Because then you can get a moment of Conrad at the start being like, you betrayed me, I didn't want this to happen to Earth, and Rani going, too bad, you suck, Omega, enter. And then that's how we get Omega.
It's not as if that sort of thing hasn't happened before.
That's true.
So, yeah. And Omega is certainly powerful enough, I think, once his power's unleashed, to do stuff like that. So, that could be an interesting way to do it. It could be like, and we've seen other stuff like this before in Doctor Who, where it's like, don't worry guys, that's Conrad, we can save him, and it turns out, oh no, he's not, because whatever it was that made him Conrad is completely gone now, and it's actually Omega, and,
Yeah.
So that could work, and it could be done in a way that's not too dissatisfying or frustrating. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, I suppose.
Yeah. I guess the only other little last thread to discuss here is Poppy. She's real. In this world, she has been chosen as the Doctor and Belinda's child. The Doctor specifically says, oh, Poppy is real. So she's been pulled back in time from the year 21506. And again, they specifically highlighted it. So what does that mean?
Okay, help me remember this. I may have just not been paying attention. When was the 2506 thing? When did that occur?
21506 is the year
21.
that Space Babies is set in.
Okay, right. Okay, right. And that was her name in that episode, yeah?
Yes, it was Captain Poppy.
Okay, that's starting to make more sense now. Because when the Doctor said, "Oh no, she's real. I know she's real," I thought, "Is that a reference to a previous character?" But I'd completely forgotten. Yeah, no, it is literally seemingly the same character. So okay, that's making a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how that's gonna fit into the narrative. It's quite out of left field to do that. I mean, it's Doctor Who, so of course it is, but...
Well, it could have just easily been, oh, they needed a baby, let's pull one from the Doctor's memory, bang, Poppy, done. But again, the Doctor specifically highlighted Poppy was real.
Yeah.
Now, that could just be a lingering remnant from John Smith being like, I want her to be real, she's my kid.
Yeah. But knowing RTD, I think the way we do, it would at least make sense that it means something more, right? Because we've seen...
She also showed up in the story in the engine. Remember as the child that Belinda saw in the streets of Lagos?
Oh, right.
So that's an extra little thing being like, they're drawing attention to Poppy for some reason.
I think then it's got to be something bigger, right? If she's shown up twice now, and we're in, RTD 2, Mr. Puzzle Box, she's got to show up again, I think, in that final episode. As to what her role will be, we'll have to wait and see. But, yeah, I'd be surprised if she didn't.
But even then, like, how much is this last episode going to have to do? It's like Delani, Omega, Poppy, Conrad. And don't forget, we still need to figure out the mystery behind the certificate of Miss Belinda Chandra world, or whatever it was. Like, there was still that question that was asked at the end of the first episode, being like, how did this get somewhere or something? What was the specific mystery that they set up? It was, I can't find it on TARDIS.fandom. Maybe it's on Wikipedia?
It wasn't meant to be just like a bootstrap thing, was it?
No, because they specifically highlighted it as a mystery at the end of the episode. When they're back in the TARDIS, it's not even it's not even like a thing in the main AI generator room. It's a specific thing they reference as a mystery when the Doctor's talking about Mundy Flynn.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, yeah. How are they? Yeah,
there's a lot that's still going to get done.
Of it all.
It's very possible that if Belinda is going to stick around as a companion, they might leave some of these threads to explore next season.
And that's a weird thing too, right? Because on one hand, I've got a feeling they're trying to wrap up her character arc with just one season, but on the other hand, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but I think I was expecting more character growth from Belinda, I suppose, at least in comparison to other companions. Now, that might just be because other seasons have simply had more episodes, so they've had more time to explore it, but it's weird. I feel like they're trying to wrap it up, but her story just doesn't feel as complete as it could be yet, which is really weird.
It's mainly because this episode, she wasn't really Belinda.
Yeah.
She was Mrs. Smith,
Yeah.
That's kind of why I'm like, I don't want Conrad to be the hero next episode, because in my mind, it has to be Belinda.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, I'd agree. And it is a little frustrating because we had similar issues with Empire of Death where there were a lot of ideas, but they were just crushed into 50 minutes. And I think I specifically said I happily would have watched that story if it had been expanded to 90 minutes. That would have probably made it better. So unless RTD is planning to make a 90-minute episode, which is not impossible.
Not impossible.
It could be another messy season finale, which honestly, that is going to be very frustrating because he's presided over, and I think written actually some knockout season finales. I'd be frustrated if we kind of got 2 duds in a row there, especially given not only how big this season is sort of teasing to be, but given that there's no way he's going to do it. Oh, there wasn't any meaning to it anyway. You just imagining an audience, he's not going to do that again.
No.
So there has to be a big payoff here. How he's going to pull it off, I don't know. If he does, I'll be living in wish world if that happens. just not super bigoted wish world. My wish world of perfect stories. But
we'll see.
I struggle a little bit to think how he's going to do it. He's got a lot of leg work, and I think the simplest solution would be to have a 90-minute story. But we really just don't know at this point.
I think it actually helps that there isn't a big mystery with Belinda right now. Like, yes, there's the certificate thing
and the Mundy Flynn of it all, but
the Mundy Flynn of all they've already kind of addressed as, oh, she's just your descendant. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't address it.
And sorry, go ahead.
But the thing I think the main thing I think we took issue with Empire of Death is also that the Ruby Sunday resolution felt a bit dissatisfying to us because it wasn't really a big focus of that episode. They have a bit more of an advantage with Belinda in that her main arc this season has been Get Me Home. It's a lot less complicated than what Ruby's got going on.
Yeah. That's true.
So that's one less thing to worry about, but I do want Belinda to have more of an active role in this next episode, just to justify. Because I think back on the previous episodes, and although I like Belinda as a character, I do like her interactions with the Doctor and what she brings to the show. In terms of actions, she hasn't really done much.
Yeah, I think that's probably what the main thing I was trying to communicate earlier. There's a great character, but I think even I may have mentioned this with Robot Revolution. She feels like a character that's already gone through quite a lot of development, even before joining, the TARDIS crew. So I'm not sure where she could go. I mean,
I guess the development could just be from, okay, thanks, you got me home, Doctor. That was kind of fun, though. Should we go on a trip, maybe? Maybe ask me permission this time, though, and then I'll say yes, and then we can bounce up to the stars. That could be a thing.
But even that element, right, of the Doctor, presuming a lot of things and sort of flaunting a sense of authority. Even that I want to see resolved a little bit more. I mean, it might be, but I don't know how it will at this point. In also a small detail, and I don't believe it's going to be sorted out in the next episode, but the Susan Foreman arc, I think that will be resolved in future seasons, but I do want to see it expanded a little bit more.
Me too.
Maybe we'll get, at the very end, we'll get a glimpse. We'll get, her living in whatever it is, Totter's Lane. She's like, grandfather, look after yourself, and the TARDIS flies off into the distance or something.
I actually wouldn't be surprised if we don't get any new Susan footage this season. The fact that we got a small snippet of her on the TV and it was just footage from the previous episode, it wasn't new footage shot specifically for this with a line in mind for Susan, makes me kind of think they used all they got everything they needed out of episode 6. The Susan thing is going to be a season 3, maybe a season 4, or sorry, season 6, 16 or 17 story that they get to do.
Yeah. I do want to see a bit more of it, the hint of things to come, though. I want to see that show up next episode.
I don't know. I think in terms of hints, I think if we get another hint next episode and it doesn't tell us a lot more about where she is, I would feel it kind of unnecessary, because to me the hint we got was last time.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think that's it. I can't
Yeah, it's a
Think of really anything else
fucking
to...
ambitious story, and it's about to get
Yeah.
a whole lot more ambitious next time.
Do,
I'm gonna
do
give
you want to hold
Wishworld.
off... Okay, I was going to
Um,
say, do you want to hold off scoring until
no,
we see
let's.
the
We
next
always do this
episode?
with finales. We always like rank them separately. I have a feeling next week is going to be very different as well. So I
Yeah,
think
probably.
it justified. We can always revise this if we decide they should be put
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
But I'm
Sure.
going to give Wishworld on its own a 7.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I think I'll give it a 7 too. Like it... Yeah, I think a 7's fair.
Right. Let's go back to our predictions.
Mhm.
I feel relatively confident that we won't see the Daleks, so
Yeah,
you don't
I
get your
mean,
points for that.
that's fine.
I've written down a prediction specifically about Ep7. Belinda dying didn't cause the walls of reality to weaken and unleash the reality war, so I don't get
Mhm.
those points.
Mhm.
We didn't see Ruby die. I don't get points for that yet. And besides, my thing was like permanently, not
Mm.
as a temporary measure. We still can't say for certain Belinda isn't an amnesiac Time Lord. I still really don't think she is, but that's your last chance to get any extra points. Squeak out of me. And unfortunately for Hadley as well, it doesn't seem like hijacking the TARDIS was part of Mrs. Flood's plan. So Hadley's going to end on 0 points.
Done. And I've
So you beat
also
her.
got the Fury of the Time Lord
Yeah,
points as well.
you've got 750 points total for your 2 accurate predictions.
Cool.
So you're finishing ahead of Hadley. You have points. It's just looking like, unless we get a monumental reveal next time, I've won this season.
Very well.
But we'll find out next time as we review the reality war, presumably between our world and the Underverse, as Omega plots to return.
Yeah.
Until then, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz. And remember, when in doubt, don't.
That's right. Don't think about things. Just listen to the TV.